Welcome back. I'd like to introduce your next speaker, Ben Johns. Ben is a senior UX manager for IMT Insurance in West Des Moines, Iowa, where he has worked for 15 years. He finds joy and satisfaction in advocating for accessible websites and system design, volunteering with local organizations including the Red Cross, the Life Serve Blood Center, and Habitat for Humanity. Ben was introduced to advocacy for deaf and hard of hearing people by his mother, Rachel, an ASL interpreter. Ben received his certified usability analyst certificate from HFI in 2019, his certificate in user experience management from NNG in 2020, and his DHS trusted tester certification from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in 2024. Please welcome Ben Johns.
All right. Thanks, Noah. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me here today. Let's talk about this important topic. I will get my slides up here and shared, make sure everybody can see them. All right. All right. And we're going to turn on captions here. Since we're talking about accessibility, that is actually one really easy step that almost anyone at any conference can do to help improve the access to the content material for people who might have difficulty hearing or viewing content on a screen or at a conference. So thanks again for the introduction. I work at IMT Insurance in West Des Moines, Iowa. Excited to talk about some accessibility today, as much as we can get in about 20 minutes. So first, I want to start by talking about some of the parallels between UX design and accessibility. UX design focusing on creating seamless, efficient, and enjoyable experiences for all users. Pretty much the same thing as accessibility, except with accessibility, perhaps more focus on making sure they're accessible by people of all abilities. And when we talk about the parallels between these two professional services, they both aim to remove barriers and improve accessibility and usability for everyone, ensuring inclusive and equitable digital experiences. So one thing to think about as we talk about this is that everything we do to improve accessibility for people of all abilities actually turns out to help everyone, because you start to put more considerations into your work that benefit everyone, not just disabled people. The four principles of accessible design set up by standards have the acronym of POUR. So the first of these being perceivable. Information and user interfaces must be presented to users in ways that they can perceive. An example of this would be when you see captions describing what's in the audio or video. And this sort of additional consideration helps people with hearing impairments who may not be able to hear the audio or the sounds that you're trying to present. Operable. This means user interface components and navigation must be operable. Well, what does that mean? One example would be that a website should support keyboard navigation. Many people will have motor skills impairments. They may be using switches or different devices to access your content. So they may not always be able to operate a mouse. So finding ways that they can access the content without having access to a mouse is extremely important to them. Understandable. The information and operation of the user interface must be understandable. So this could be in how the content is written, presented, also using consistent navigation patterns. And this would benefit people who may have visual disabilities or cognitive impairments. We're just trying to make sure that they know how to navigate our sites and it consistently presents in a way that is meaningful to them. And lastly, the R, robust. Content can be interpreted by a wide variety of user agents, which include assistive technologies. So by using standard HTML elements, there's more compatibility across all web browsers. Using standard Reliant code, it can come across and make sure that they're able to view and understand it. So next, I just kind of want to jump into an example of why accessibility in design is important. The United States has about 26% of adults are disabled. So roughly 1 in 4 people have some sort of disability. That is just a huge number of people that could be visiting your site, your service, or need your assistance. This can include visual impairments, blindness, low vision, color blindness, hearing impairments, deafness or hard of hearing, motor disabilities, including limited dexterity, tremors, and paralysis, cognitive disabilities such as dyslexia, ADHD, and memory impairments. And 71% of users with disabilities will leave a website that is not accessible. That's based on a Web AIM survey. Just keeping that in mind, how many people are actually considering this as they're designing their sites, their services, that they could be losing 25% of the population right off the bat. Over 96% of the world's top 1 million web pages are not accessible. We take a lot of things for granted, at least I do. Being able to see, hear, and have all my, abilities here pretty well in control. But if I could not get to 96% of the sites or pages that were important to me, it would just be really a different world. Many people with disabilities rely on assistive technologies like screen readers, switches, and pointing devices, and those can also be hindered by inaccessible website design. Jumping into an example here, we're going to talk about Rachel and a barrier that she has to vital information. So this is Rachel. She is blind and deaf, and she navigates the digital world using a screen reader with a Braille display. The screen reader can extract the text, structure, and content from the website and converts it to Braille, which then she can read and understand. During the winter, there's a major blizzard warning, and it's approaching Rachel's town, and the local news site has posted an emergency alert about the incoming storm. However, this alert may only be posted as an image with no alt text, which makes this information inaccessible to Rachel. And since this site happens to be Rachel's primary source for local weather info, she may be unaware of the upcoming disruptions to the services that she relies on every day. In addition, the public transportation system has updated their bus schedules due to the impending storm, and they decided to change their times and routes on their website. But when they do it, they put it in an untagged, non-navigable table that Rachel's technology cannot interpret. As a result, Rachel's normal bus route has been delayed by 2 hours. So this is moving her pickup time from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. in a potential blizzard. I think you could imagine the sort of problems that could create. But in case you couldn't imagine them, let's talk about it. Some of the consequences of Rachel being unaware of the dangerous blizzard conditions: she doesn't know the bus route has changed, and she risks being unprepared and stranded in unsafe weather. Maybe she's not dressed properly. She leaves the house, she gets stranded, has difficulty getting back home to where she is, stuck in the cold. I mean, this could be a life and death scenario for Rachel. Some solutions that could help improve this for her is if the news website provided alternative text for the images and the alerts, ensuring that people with disabilities are able to access that information. Also, on the transportation website, if they use a table that is not coded with accessibility in mind, they need to be ensuring the screen reader compatibility by using proper HTML structure of those tables. And lastly, again, kind of same note, is using semantic elements for tables, schedules, and all content, making these sites something that are easier to access for everyone, people of all abilities. Ultimately, inclusion is really not optional. It's essential. It's very important for 25% of the U.S. to be able to have access to this sort of information. So how can UX pros improve accessibility? Now, I just think that when people are doing initial research and design, they have special access that many other people don't have. And even with limited accessibility knowledge, there are things that we can all be doing to help improve the longer term success of a project with accessibility in mind. So I'm just going to list a handful of options. These are not an exhaustive list, but just some basic things that you could do day to day as a UX designer to try to help improve this process for others. One is design system considerations. So when using a design system, ensure that you're system uses appropriate size and color contrast in headlines, buttons, links, and interactive components. Websites have been trending to larger font sizes, more bold colors, larger graphics, more responsive layouts. So sometimes this just happens by that fact. But if not, if you're looking at your site, you can bring that up into the picture earlier in the process. Using consistent layouts and predictable navigation. As a UX designer, or if you're working on UIs or screens or prototypes, ensuring that you're consistently putting things in the same spot so that people can find them consistently. Ensure that your design allows scalable typography and responsive layouts. So many disabled people will be accessing your sites on different devices. It could be a phone, it could be a tablet, it could be any number of devices. And they may not have their font size at 100%. Like we use it on a normal basis, maybe at 100%. Some people may have their screen font zoomed to 200%. And if you don't test your website with, say, a 200% zoom, you don't know how that could affect the layout. It could blow up the tables. It could increase the size of things. It could push stuff off the screen, make a side scroll, a number of things. So make sure that when you're working on those designs early, that you're checking those sort of things by zooming the screen and checking the font sizes and things grow accordingly. Do not rely on color alone to indicate actions or important information. So this means if you have a text link, I was guilty of this earlier in my career. I didn't think underlines looked cool in text. I just wanted it to be a color. I thought it looked sharp, thought it made it easier to read, and I would just remove an underline. Well, if you just use a color alone, people that are colorblind may not understand that that's a link. An underline is a very important element that helps indicate that sort of functionality to people of all abilities. And if you remove that and are now relying only on color, there's a high likelihood that many people will just miss it altogether. Account for captions for videos and alt text for images. We talked about this just a little bit earlier in the example with Rachel. So making sure that if you have additional content that is not normal HTML or standard something that can be read by a browser or user agent, put that information in there. Write a little description, put alongside the video. Somebody who can't hear or see it will really value that information just as much as anyone else in your audience. Using appropriate HTML elements is another big one. So headings, H1 tags, H2 tags, unordered lists. Those types of elements in HTML are used by assistive technology to help provide a preview of a page for someone on assistive technology. So much like somebody who has clear vision could use their eyes to quickly navigate a page and jump to the content they wish to view, by using these headings that can more quickly allow someone who doesn't have vision to navigate to a section of a page that is most important and meaningful to them. This is a really important one, creating forms with clear labels, instructions, and error messaging. If even people who are fully capable with all of their abilities intact, completing some forms is a nightmare. And just imagine that you couldn't read the label, or you couldn't see the alert that says, hey, you're missing this, or imagine that it's asking for a strange format. I saw a website recently that wanted people to input a phone number, and below the input, it said, enter the phone number in this format. And it was 3 X's and a dash, 3 X's and a dash, and then 4 X's. And if you did not put it in with the 3-3-4 characters, it just didn't submit. It did give an error. It didn't say it was wrong, but you couldn't submit the form, and there was no way to understand what you were doing wrong. Okay, so considering that sort of thing is really important. Let's not make it any harder for people than it needs to be. And when there is an error or when there is special instructions, make sure they're clear and visible so that everyone can find them and complete the process. Moving into keyboard and assistive technology support. As mentioned earlier, many people will have limitations on motor skills where they're using different types of devices to access or navigate or move through a website. So making sure that your website is keyboard accessible is another step that is not difficult to do and will make your site much more usable by a much wider audience. So one of those things is the tab order. When someone visits your site, if they're using a keyboard, the tab button should allow them to jump from interactive element to interactive element on your site through the navigation, through main links, through opportunities to move from page to page. And you don't just want it bouncing all around the screen. You don't want to start on the logo and then bounce to the content and then bounce over to the navigation. You want to do it left to right in a meaningful way so that they can kind of predict where their next move is going to take them. You can also test your sites with screen readers. So NVDA, JAWS, VoiceOver are a few examples of screen readers that can be used and are common with people accessing your content. I will say that when I started looking at screen readers, I was completely overwhelmed. It is a completely different way of accessing content. And when you hear the speed or the way it navigates through a page, it is almost infuriating how fast and how challenging it is for me to use that. But that's the normal for some people, and they get used to it. So it's important for us to understand that and say, hey, how can we ensure that this is going to meet their needs? Also, try and include people of all abilities in your usability testing and research. This might be a challenge pending the size of your business or the aim of your site, but there's local organizations for disabled people in probably every state and in large cities. And if you would like to get some additional people to test and walk through your site, they can give you amazing feedback that you may not otherwise be privy to. So try and include those people in your testing and research. Document what they've said and see what you can do with your team to try and help minimize that sort of problem going forward. I've included here some additional resources, just some things that if you're not an accessibility professional, these tools are things that you could use to help you get a little more comfortable with things we can do to help other people. So the top one is the Trusted Tester Certification. This is a course online. It's free. It does take some effort and some time, but by the time you get through it, you'll have a much better understanding of things you can do to help people access your content. I estimate it probably takes 30 to 40 hours of self-paced training and assessment. There's materials to review. There's tests. It's very meaningful, very helpful. It's free. And I would certainly say that if you're a UX designer who has any interest in trying to learn some of this stuff, this is a great free resource to be able to help improve your abilities in this area. I've also included a link, some links here to some, to some different accessibility testing tools. So we have Wave, Axe, Andy. All of these are linked. So if we send out the presentation later and you want to click through it, I think you should be able to do that. Andy is the one that is actually used in the DHS Trusted Tester materials. So it talks about how do you access a page, open it, look for things that are problematic or would create problems for people with disabilities. Lighthouse, that's another one by Google. If you just inspect your web page, you go to your system or your tool and you say inspect element, Lighthouse is usually an option under there. You can do an audit for an accessibility. Some of these automated testers, though, are certainly not going to give you the full picture. They can only test things that can be automated. But there's a lot of things that you're going to need to do manually to ensure that you are providing accessible content and information. A contrast checker, super easy tool. Open it up the link, copy in your colors, put in your font sizes, and it will tell you, hey, are these ratios good, bad? How could you improve them? Really easy to do. Our team went through, we had been working on our design system for a couple of years, and we'd been talking about contrast on a variety of things. And even buttons that we looked at and thought would meet accessibility standards were surprisingly not considered to meet the appropriate contrast. So easy tool, pop out there, take a look at it, put in your values. Just a really easy step to try and help ensure that visibility and accessibility by a wider audience. The WCAG guidelines, by the W3C. That's official documentation and compliance guides. They have great search options on that site, so you can search up rules, terms, phrases, and things to help you find what you're looking for and get you on the right track. In our prior screen, I talked a little bit about some screen readers, JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver, TalkBack. So those are some additional tools that, I challenge you to go get one of these tools and visit your site or your tool and walk through it and see how it operates. Your eyes will be open. It'll be amazing what you find and what you would never have considered it being a problem. And then lastly, just kind of a list of some different assistive technologies, including screen magnifiers, braille displays, speech recognition software, and eye tracking technology. So again, if you have any questions or you ever want to talk about any of this stuff, you can certainly reach out. The links will be in these slides. But I think it's a better world when we are considerate of others. And as UX designers, we're uniquely situated to be able to make an impact on the lives of other people. And if you weren't in UX to help people, then I would be surprised. So it's a very mutual and very beneficial opportunity to help level up what we do for other people. So with that, I would open it up to see if we have any questions.
Beautiful. Yeah, we have 3 questions so far. Reminder to all of the attendees, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Actually, we have more than 3. But yeah, put your questions in the Q&A box and please upvote any questions that you'd like to hear the answers to. We do use those votes to help prioritize the questions. The first question we have from Erwin Jankovic is, are there design symbols that can give designers more flexibility in their designs while also helping assistive users use the site? For example, instead of requiring underlines, is the symbol that means link, is there a symbol that means link that takes the assistive reader to the selected site?
I'm not sure about symbols. The thing about using in links, particularly, there's a few things that you can do. I can't speak to a specific symbol. I'm not aware of anything like that, but using meaningful links text. So for example, if you're on the homepage and you have 3 features and each of the features just has a link at the bottom of the section that says more, 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 right? Each one just says more. When a screen reader accesses that site, it's just going to read off more. They don't know more what, they would have to then have the context of being able to read through all of the other content to know what it's more about. Additionally, I would say that there are some other things, like say you're linking out to, say, for example, a document or a file, right? You could use like a PDF, like you could say a PDF or PowerPoint, or you could put some other description with the link to indicate that when somebody is clicking on it, what type of file or item they would be expecting. I think the best thing you can do is use standard HTML and standard text whenever possible. If you're really limited by space and you need to use something else because you have a tight space, make sure you're using alternative text on those icons or images that you might be trying to implement to say text link or link to file or something to help indicate what that image means. Especially when you consider a broader audience, like it's easy for me just to think about what does somebody in the Midwest do because I live in the Midwest, but not all images or symbols mean the same thing to every person. So just keep that in mind. Does that help answer your question?
We'll have to answer about if that helps answer the question in the chat. But
Okay.
that sounds like a
Okay.
very thorough answer to me, and I know I've seen that there's a real issue. Yeah, everyone says that's fine. But yeah, symbols are tricky because they're so much less intuitive than you expect unless you've just had it kind of exposed to you a lot already.
Yeah.
The next question that I see upvoted, Dira Sutar asks, how are you using AI for design accessibility across various disabilities, especially neurodiverse or people with cognitive disabilities?
I have not been using AI directly for accessibility work to this point. I'm sure there are ways that you could be integrating that. I do know that a lot of tools that are would say like be a screen reader that might read through a screen and tell you some of the things about it are not always going to tell you the actual truth about what is making that screen hard for a disabled person to use, because not everything is black and white and not just something that a screen reader can tell you. One example, I'm just going to use an example, is that some images are not supposed to have alt text on them. I think a common misperception is that every image should have alt text. Well, if an image is decorative, meaning it's not adding any additional value to the screen, it's actually better for that text to not have an alternate text description, because it's not adding value to the person who's going through that page. So on a page, you might run one of those automated scans and it would say, hey, you're missing alt text on this image, but that thing doesn't know that this is a decorative image and that it really shouldn't have that. So I know that what I'm talking about is not necessarily AI, but admittedly, I haven't spent a lot of time in that space directly as it relates to accessibility. So hopefully we'll be learning more about that. I know AI is probably a key factor of pretty much every conversation so far. But I'm currently unaware of ways to integrate that.
Yeah, it's certainly top of mind for a lot of folks right now.
For sure.
All right. Let's see. Next question. Jishnu Kadil. I'm not sure if I'm getting that name right. Maybe it's Kadile. In your experience, what are some accessibility widgets like UserWay that you'd recommend for websites to have for users?
Right. So this is a really interesting topic. Our site uses at the insurance company that I work at, we use an accessibility widget, but I also work with some other professionals in the accessibility space, and a lot of times, people that are accessing the site that may benefit from those tools are not huge fans of the tools themselves because they feel maybe it's a shortcut to actually doing it the right way, right? So you have an overlay. A lot of them are presented as an overlay.
Yeah.
And people will complain that the overlays aren't actually solving the problem for them. They're just kind of putting a Band-Aid over it. And they would prefer that you actually wrote the code properly. I'm going to go back here a couple slides and just talk about a couple of these accessibility tools that I have over here listed. I think they do a good job. But I think that the best answer is to make sure you are writing your code with semantic HTML that can be translated by a variety of user agents and browsers. That's the best thing you can do. And if you don't have the ability, the budget, or the workforce to be able to do everything by the book, then you can look at screen overlay tools. But if you are coming at this from like a development standpoint, or if you're coming from this as a visitor visiting a site, they're two different things. So as a developer, these are some of the tools that I would use to say test your content to ensure that you have most accessible features available. Wave, Axe, and Andy. Let me see here. I think what you're talking about, though, I might try and open a different screen. A second here. Give me 1 second. All right. So our site utilizes a tool down here.
What we're seeing now is the presentation, like the slides.
Okay, I think I would need to share a different screen. 1 second here. So can you see my screen now?
Yep, we see the website.
Okay, so we use this tool here, Accessibility, and I will tell you that I like the options that this sort of tool affords to our website. To be fair, we still did a full inspection of our site for accessibility considerations, and we have those implemented in the site. This tool, Accessibility, is pretty reasonably priced to be able to allow something if you don't have the time and budget to do all the stuff yourself. But it can help. It will do things like modify colors to prevent seizures. You can set all sorts of settings on here as far
Mm,
as content scaling, changing fonts. I don't want to do too much of an advertisement for anyone, but like this tool, I
yeah.
think that if you are trying to get a quick solution to start your journey into accessibility, I like this Accessibility, but I would say that this should not be the end of your accessibility efforts. Ultimately completing that DHS Trusted Tester course and going through and making accessible content a priority is, something I would say longer term. But using this as maybe a step in that direction would be beneficial.
Beautiful. All right. And maybe briefly, we have a minute. Are there any accessibility tools that are AI based that you're familiar with?
Again, I haven't done a ton in the AI space. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
sure just with everything else, there probably is. Um, I would just say that if you are starting to look into that, I mean, early adoption is one thing, but they don't always hit the mark. So, if you're using AI, I would say use it to generate ideas and figure out
Mhm.
ways that you can improve. But I wouldn't just rely on it as being the accessibility solution, but hopefully more of a direction or a path that you could take to get there.
That's great. All right. That is the end of the time that we have to hear from Ben Johns. Please give Ben a big thank you, a big round of applause with the emotes, and we'll say thank you so much, Ben
Thanks for having
Johns.
me. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.